Well, you're born in the 90s, not...
Yeah, well, early 90s.
Because I grew up in the 90s, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, although we were
the
talking
90s
about this.
cultural references won't necessarily hit home.
Yeah, we were driving up this morning, right? And we spend so much time together that we've started to like mutate into one person, like one being.
Yeah.
And we both immediately just burst into song out of nowhere, and we were singing Rob, because Robert, you know, you're obviously here, and then Rosie was here before you, and we were going Robin and Rosie, Robin and Rosie, da, da, da. And then we were like, what is that tune? And we were like, we can't have made it up because we've both just started singing it. And it turned out it was Bodger and Badger.
Oh yeah. Do you remember that?
Because you immediately think it was going to be Rosie and Jim, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And then
we sang that next.
This was the same conversation we had. See, same brainwave.
Because because I got asked the other day. You know, sometimes doing interviews, you get those questions. You think, I wonder if my brain will work fast enough. And someone in the audience actually said, "What character would you be from Wind in the Willows?" Which had nothing to do with anything we talked about. And I immediately went, I said Badger because I think I have the largest collection of books, and also his jaw is actually hinged and attached by bone, whereas all the other animals, upon death, the jaw would drop. So it would allow me to keep talking for a bit longer.
Good reason as any.
Yeah. Fascinating. You'll know all about badger skulls, though, won't you?
Yeah. Well, yes, actually.
No, that's what I genuinely thought you would because of your work, and you will have thought about the anatomy of things. And
I would say that I usually think more about like the personalities of the animals,
right?
But
so while they're still alive.
Yeah.
As opposed to the rotting corpse.
I probably prefer animals to be alive. My sentences don't usually start with upon death. But yeah, no. I mean, I guess as a wildlife artist, I should understand the anatomy because you're doing
all right. I've seen your work.
Thanks.
Yeah. I wouldn't worry too much.
So,
I wouldn't get bogged down by skeletal structure. You don't need to worry about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? There was. I was doing an event with Harry Hill on Saturday, and he was showing some of his silent movies that he's made. And there's one with a donkey, but all the long shots of him as Napoleon riding the donkey, of course, they have to be a pretend man sat on there because the donkey's back isn't strong enough. Because they're quite like a zebra. They're quite. And he said it was quite weird. He said because obviously we had a donkey that had been stuffed in a real donkey, and he said every now and again I'd look at the donkey that was alive and I could sense it almost go through existential anxiety as it went, is that my future? Why am I here? Will I end up on wheels to be part of some kind of joke?
Oh, weird.
Well, Robin, it's lovely to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. It's a real privilege. I know you're sort of dismissing it as being like, but we appreciate
people. It's nice.
Me too. Funny enough, just touching on something you just said about kind of searching for information, and I wondered about this. Been wondering about this for a little while. Are we, as an international community, becoming sort of the beneficiaries of past fact finders? Because you seem like obviously a very curious person, someone who's always curious about the world and how it works and everything in it. Do you think that we are like resting on our laurels a little bit when it comes to curiosity and fact finding?
I think it's half and half. I think there's never been as many curious people who are so excited to have access to information, and then on the other side, I'm sure you saw that clip the other day. I'm not entirely sure what it was about. I think it was about two parents who were going to take their child away from the school because of critical race theory. Did you see that clip where so the reporter goes, so why what have you got against the school? And he goes, critical race theory. And he said, can you explain what is critical race theory? And he went, I don't know. And it wasn't like watching one of those radio shows where someone slowly is their cognitive dissonance is spinning at a speed near that of light because they realise they have no understanding of why they've made that decision. This was someone literally saying, I'm against this, and what is it? I have no idea. And so there is a lot of that. There's a lot of people. I mean, one of the things about resting on our laurels as well, it's interesting when you think of all the past people, is for me it's always intriguing all of the forgotten people who've been culturally forgotten because they were not the dominant group at the time. So, when we look at female artists, when we look at female scientists, when we look at anthropologists, and so even that alone, you start to get an incredible rich history, which is before we start to think about the future, we need to, when you go and you look at how written off, indigenous groups like in Australia were, and you start to find out about their science, and you're not able to survive in somewhere like Australia just by wandering about and every now and again killing a kangaroo and eating it. There's a real complexity to their relationships with the sky, their understanding of the stars, the nature of myth. So, the first thing I think we need to do is start scrubbing our mind a little of the presumptions we make from the reality tunnel that we live in, which is, if you don't keep trying to punch holes, you end up, we see a lot of this, of course, in some of the trans debate. Incredible aggression there because people want, what about the science? What the science is, and you go, well, actually, to me, it appears to be, it's like everything in biology. It's much murkier, We, Giles, you and me, we're both men, but for the time being, and but we're different levels of, that idea that you are merely this one thing. And so that, that's another huge thing that we need to kind of, people get very worried if they lose their certainties. And actually, one of the main things that we need, it's not merely about resting on our laurels, it's about opening ourselves up to doubt. It's about working out why we believe. You are only asking one question, and then I just talk 45 minutes. Can I just check now?
Perfect.
Right, okay, sorry, I've suddenly realised there's no short answers.
No, it's great.
I don't even know what I'm talking about. That's the thing that I enjoy. This is like, I never, the branching off, and you suddenly go, well, how on earth have I got there?
Well,
but I do think, avoiding, trying to sit down and sit with people and let's talk in a doubtful manner. Let's talk, I'm very interested in a woman called Anne Fausto Sterling, who wrote a book called Sexing the Body. She's a biologist, an activist, and a feminist. She's 78 years old now, and I just mentioned how good her book was. At one point, she said something that just made me think a lot. She said, you have to remember that, I think it was, this is a slight misquote, right, so I apologise for that, but she said that notions of gender are a social, not scientific construct. And I mentioned that and then got all these people piling on and being very aggressive about that. And I wasn't talking about anything apart from that. I'd just been to see an exhibition called Undefining Queer at the Whitworth in Manchester. And someone then said, well, you do know that her work is a satire, actually. And I said, I don't think it is. But if I was quite open. I said, maybe I've entirely misunderstood. I said, I do know she wrote a paper that was satirical. And then I wrote to her, and she was very quick. She came straight back. She went, no, my book's not satirical at all. She said, I did write a paper that's satirical, but even that paper that's satirical is I also mean it. So that's how satire. And then when someone came back at me again, and I said, "Look, I've actually spoken to Anne Fausto Sterling, and this is what she said." And they went, "Well, I don't think that matters, though." And you go, so literally now, this strange extended Derrida idea of the author, which is, well, she didn't even know. She thought she was. she's written a satire.
Yeah.
And I find those kind of things are, they can also drive you mad.
Yeah.
But
I think people get so attached to their beliefs and the way that they see the world, and anything outside of that can be quite threatening. It's like somebody's like ripping the rug out from under your feet to even consider any other way of looking at the world. And you see it when you do watch people get into these arguments, and Twitter is great for it because you can read all the comments, and you've got people giving evidence, like, actually this is how it actually is. I've spoken to the author or whatever, and then the response is often anger and rage that you've tried to sort of question their idea of what the world is. And I suppose science especially is interesting for that, because you're making new discoveries all the time. And I always think with science, people see it as fact, but it's fact that as we know it in the moment, but as we learn more about the world, at one point we thought the world was flat, and now we know better, kind of thing. And so I guess, do you sort of I know that you have a lot of dealings with science as well because of your amazing podcast, The Infinite Monkey Cage. People should go listen. And I know that you sort of joke around that you're sort of like you're surrounded by all these scientists and you're the one that comes in and makes all these jokes and stuff, but you're obviously a very intelligent man. And do you see this in the scientific sort of community as well, people kind of battling with different ideas of the world and having their belief systems shattered?
Yeah, I think the book that I wrote a while ago, partly that's what I wanted to do, was try and say you can have a kind of superposition of beliefs, that you can, science, it's very important for people to know that science is, good scientific ideas are there, but they may well, it's a transitional period. The fact that scientists now, they have a lot of trouble putting together quantum mechanics and the idea of gravity at the very start of the universe. They just don't seem to be able to work. And so I talk to scientists and they'll say, well, in the end, gravity will be disproved. Not that it doesn't mean that we all suddenly float off, because I remember saying that to someone once and they looked terrified. I said, no. The world will still, in terms of the physical behaviour, it will be the same, but the understanding of what gravity is may require a whole. So those kind of things need to be moving all the time. And, in biology and genetics, every time there's a new paper about genetics, it becomes messier and messier and messier. And I think that's really important for people to know. But then at the same time, not to, because people think that science is saying this is certain, then when it does change, they go, oh, I see, scientists got that wrong. And you go, no, it's a move. And I think it's very important for, like, I've got a very different kind of mind, obviously, to Brian. Like, if we were talking about ghosts, for instance, Brian would say ghosts break the second law of thermodynamics, and so they don't exist, and that would be the end of that. Whereas my interest in ghosts is why we believe in ghosts, the fact that I think that when you're in any place which has any sense of a history a knowledge that you have of the history, you can have a sense of the ghosts that are around there. Now, that's not ghosts as in the Canterville ghost or anything like that, and someone holding up their, like, in the TV series Ghost, not like that, but this sense of memory is, so that's, I suppose that's where I am, on the hippie side.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I believe that our memory and our psychology creates beautiful and wonderful things if you open yourself up to it, but I don't believe that when you die, when I die, when Giles dies, I don't believe that the something of ourself that is left behind will be someone who's looking at one of your works on the wall, and they will go, oh man, I remember I saw Sophie doing that, and I'm remembering, and so you are still alive there. You're still alive in the mind. And that's where the ghost is. And they might be going for a walk one day, and they'll remember a time that you painted a hill that was over there, or they'll remember a time that they were walking with you. And to me, and sometimes it's not even people you knew. I've talked before about standing in the middle of the stones of Callanish on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Standing in the middle of that stone circle and placing my hand on a stone there, I had a tremendous sense. It was beautiful, quiet day, sunny, no one else there. Tremendous sense of just feeling the history and all the things that had been there before. But rather than that coming from the stone, I think that comes from all the jumbled up things in my mind. The contact of that stone, it's like it zooms out, hits the stone, and then comes back as all these echoes. So that's do you believe in ghosts? Again, we need to define it. It's a bit like when people say, do you believe in God? Well, actually, God is so many different things. But yeah, so if we say ghosts as in when someone's died, there is still actually outside of you, there may still be a voice, there may be someone who returns outside of you. Yeah,
I think I do. I think my views of the world, I view it more in terms of energy rather than, like a man in a white sheet, like the typical view of the guy, that sort of thing. But I look at the world, or as people and plants and animals and stuff, as sort of vibrating energy. And then when we die, that energy has to continue in some way, right? But I think I believe in like past lives and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm quite, what's the word for that? Hippie?
We're all hippies.
Spiritual?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, spiritual as well means so many different things. I wouldn't. That's not how I think about it. But I think there's nothing wrong with like all of these thoughts. I think it's only a bit like when you was talking before about identity. This is one of the dangerous things: is the moment that your belief becomes your identity.
Right.
Yeah.
Then when someone attacks that, or even just questions it, this is why in a very simple way. Vegetarianism or veganism or things like that, people get very uppity about that. And I think it's not because that person isn't eating meat. It's because they see that person as saying, oh, that's very interesting, so you've killed a cow. And they're not saying that. And in fact, my experience of most vegans, I'm very pleased that vegans exist, because as a vegetarian, they've taken the heat off us hugely. But
you're welcome.
Most of them aren't like, they're not always going on about, all those jokes about, how do you know if you're with a vegan? They'll tell you. Yeah. And it's like, no, more people bang on about vegans banging on than vegans bang on.
Yeah.
That's where the real tedium is.
Well, that is, was it you I was talking to about this yesterday? No, I don't think it was. Anyway, I was talking about something. Every time I go and eat dinner with my family who live up in Surrey.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, every single time it gets brought up, but not
Yeah.
by me. It's like, oh, we've got to accommodate the person that doesn't eat animals or whatever. And it's like, but if you don't know how to cook a meal that doesn't have meat in it or dairy or whatever, like, what are you eating? What, like on a day-to-day basis? But anyway,
No, but that's a great example, a very simple physical example of the demand of a certain strict normality in the world. And I think we see that in so many different, I've certainly experienced it talking to people about mental health, talking to them about sometimes if they have a physical disability. Sometimes you can see it as a very political thing, but even these slighter stories are a story which is the offence to not follow the rules that have been supposedly agreed upon, but probably none of us have agreed upon them. They just kind of circle around us and restrict us.
that is so true. Yeah, and I wonder if sort of social media as well exacerbates that, because now the whole world is at our fingertips, whereas before we were in villages and we were kind of confined to the people that we were our immediate, companions or whatever. And now you can see people all over the world, different cultures, different races, different, LGBTQ plus community members, like everyone is at, which is amazing, but it also means that it rocks the boat for so many people that are in this little bubble of like, no, the world has to be like this sort of thing.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying about questioning people's ideas and how ideas are so connected to their identity. And you've obviously just talked about that, and how, like once your identity is being questioned, then obviously you're going to be defensive about that, and like your negativity is going to spawn from that.
Well, we often look at it the wrong way round as well, in terms of, like, there was an article in the Telegraph recently, which again, that's one of the problems with social media. I don't read any newspapers, but I know what's in them every single day.
Yeah.
That doesn't make me happy.
What's trending?
But it was about the fact that this older publisher was saying that he worried that due to diversity, we wouldn't find the new John Grisham. And you go, but no, you're looking at that entirely the wrong way round. To me anyway, my personal, which is, who are the John Grishams, if that's what you're looking for, that you've missed because they weren't a white bloke?
Exactly. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, we were talking about this as well. Not reading the news and stuff, and I'm really bad for it. Like I switch off to anything like political, world affairs.
That's why Sophie's so happy.
Yeah. No, I honestly think it is.
This blissful life away from the news.
We were talking about something. You're like, I was like, I don't need to know about that now. I'll read about it in the history books in a few years. Yeah. Obviously, in terms of politics, I'll do my research when it comes time to vote, and then once that's done and that's over with, I just let it go. And it's so nice to not have those like super strong political beliefs and ideologies, because then when people are sort of like butting heads and having these like really heated debates about that sort of thing, I don't get as triggered by it. My triggers are more in terms of like, how we treat people and stuff like that, and actually politics and how we treat people, like our values, go hand in hand. Often it's people that have certain political ideologies will also have similar values in that sense, I think. So yeah, I think social media is pretty bad for that, isn't it? Sort of people clashing in terms of politics, religion, stuff like that.
Well, like the day we're recording this, there's the Roald Dahl story, which you've seen, which is, there's been, I think the word fat for Augustus Gloop has been changed to enormous. There's a few minor changes of his book. I can see how some people believe that the art should remain exactly the same, but to me, mainly, that is something which will now be where your righteous ire gets poured. And so then the actual things that look like childhood poverty and the increase in childhood poverty, which if you're worried about children, you're worried about the fact they're going to read enormous instead of fat, you're going to be even more worried about the fact that they're living, more and more children are living in poverty. But you've got rid of all your righteous ire on this much smaller story, which of course everyone can write about, because everyone can have an opinion. It doesn't require research. It doesn't require going to a small town in South Wales and seeing what's happening to children there, whatever it might be, or any inner city, etc. And so I think it's a very good reason to stay away from newspapers, because you will eventually find out what's going on anyway.
Yeah.
And news. I mean, something that really frustrates me is that every single day, shows start with, and let's have a look at today's newspapers, and it's the end of the evening now, and the newspapers go, and so it means that already our conversations have been controlled by a group of non-tax-paying, super rich people. So suddenly you've got steered off. Yeah, so things like that, I think it is, and as you said, kindness and how you treat people. That's the first, it's like walking into a room, isn't it, and seeing the first thing of the different disparity in power. When you actually can observe that, when you can observe, I've worked on TV shows where I've seen someone come in and they've shouted at the runner because their ham sandwich is not the kind of ham they wanted. And then the executive producer comes in and they're so lovely. And from that point onwards, they're on my little list of untrustworthy human being.
Yeah. Oh God, I hate that, don't you? It's people that are like rude to waiters and waitresses and stuff like that, but then they're really nice to the person sat opposite them. It's sneaky.
Well, that's what Muhammad Ali said, didn't he?
Oh,
He said, I always judge people by the way they treat their waiter, because it would only be a couple of changes in my life and I'd have been that waiter.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that's
exactly. It's so true. There's something to be said about that for sure. It's the kind of entitled, networky, it's just lack of compassion at the end of the day, isn't it? But I do feel like people kind of can mask their identity, and I'm using, inverted commas for that, as their political value or their political views or their religious views or whatever it is. It's sometimes they use that as an excuse to sort of thinly veil, racism or whatever it might be, like some quite bigoted views and stuff like that. And it's like they're hiding behind that mask of, this is my identity. I'm this way inclined politically or religiously or whatever it might be. And yeah, they can easily use that, I think.
There's an interesting... I've been banging on about this book a lot. It's called Homegrown by Joan Smith, who also wrote Misogynies, a couple of versions of that book. And she wrote a book looking at terrorist acts, really predominantly in the 21st century, as far as I remember. It's a while ago since I read it. But the most interesting takeaway thing from the book was a lot of the men, nearly all the men, I think, who had committed violent acts in the name of religion, actually had not... They weren't fundamentalists initially. What they had a track record all of being was people who were abusers. They were people who, in one case, actually someone who'd managed to kill 2 of his wives and get away with it. And so you go, and it's a nice, easy thing for us to go back to that quote, religion doesn't make people do bad acts, but without religion you wouldn't have. I can't remember exactly. And you go, that's just not true. Fundamentalism is a danger, but sometimes fundamentalism, what really draws people to certain kind of belief systems is, as you just said, it gives them the justification.
Yes.
So you go, because I believe that, actually, that's... And you watch some of these, a politician like Rees Mogg, who will sometimes stand up and say it is his religion that gives him these opinions on whatever it might be. But then there's lots of other bits where the religion is of no importance whatsoever.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah.
It's okay to have poor kids, but not have abortions, basically.
Yeah.
That's I wanted to go back to what I was obviously asking you at the beginning, was about this kind of...
Have we gone off the subject?
We did a little
That's
bit.
That's a bit weird. I don't know how that happened.
It's fine. I like it.
So linear, normally.
This idea about curiosity and that, and obviously we've touched on like the fact that people have certain ideas about the world and how we can... I was just is there a way we can cultivate these things more? How can we kind of encourage people to actually seek out information and actually do a bit of due diligence on certain subjects?
I think you have to be open, firstly, to the idea that there might be things at school that you found really boring because of the way that they were taught, which, of course, nowadays is very often due to the curriculum that is pushed onto the teachers and forced onto them more than the teachers themselves. I often meet, not just science teachers, lots of teachers, and they're so frustrated by having to keep hitting targets, because to me the most important thing that we should be taught is to be excited by knowledge. So it doesn't matter if you don't know everything about Macbeth at the end of that English lesson, but the idea that you want to know more about Macbeth, that's the important thing. Yeah. So I think firstly is to really just go I'm going to stare at that wall there. There's a wall opposite me now. I'm going to think about why that wall was built. Why was that wall built? Who built that wall? Who was thinking when they built these studios? Whatever, you look at a plant and you think about photosynthesis, or you think about, there's a lovely thing where when you start thinking of all the connections of the story, Oliver Sacks, who's a writer that I absolutely adore, man who mistook his wife for a hat and things like that. And he wrote this lovely piece. There's a collection of pieces he wrote about Darwin and the psychologist William James stuff. I think it's called River of, I can't remember anyway, but River of Thought, something like that. And the first one is about how he fell in love with flowers. And one of the things he fell in love with was when he was a little boy, he was going around the garden with his mum, and he looked at the marigolds and he noticed that they weren't being pollinated by bees. There were no bees there. There was a weird little beetle instead. And that's when his mother explained that when you look inside a flower and you see what's pollinating it, you get some sense of what evolved at what time. So bees and flowers, you need to have roughly the same timeline, because that's there. And then marigolds, because they actually were there before tulips, daffodils, etc. Well, they wouldn't get pollinated by bees because bees didn't exist. So that relationship. So suddenly you immediately, just by looking in that flower, you see a new relationship and you see a new story there. And I think it is to stop wanting to be certain. It's a very hard thing, because the older you get, you want to believe certain things, and sometimes when people question you, I was talking about this with Lucy Nichol, who just written a book called Don't Call Me Snowflake, and we were talking about the fact that sometimes when you're trying to be progressive, you end up saying something where someone progressive says, oh, actually that word really isn't a cool word, and blah blah blah. And your first reaction is, I was just trying to help. And of course, the thing is that you have to go, well, do you know what? If you are trying to help, then you have to listen.
Yeah.
So I think listening is a really, is such an important thing. But I have no template of doing it. All I can say is that the world to me becomes so much. It's like yesterday. I think I used to have much worse anxiety than I have now, and there's things that I do now that I wouldn't have been able to do a couple of years ago. I've always been quite approachable after gigs and stuff like that. But you know that bit when you go into someone else's space. So yesterday at the Bristol Old Vic, there was there's a little library in the foyer where people can borrow books, and there was a woman just looking at the library, and I was between shows, and there was a book called Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo, which is one of my favourite. I thought it was just an incredible novel, and I just wandered over. I said, I'm so sorry, but can I just say, this book here, because you're browsing, is the most wonderful novel. And then it fortunately actually turned out, she went, oh, I saw you at Toppings in Bath. I was hoping you might come over. So but I didn't know that before. But
maybe that's why she was stood by the books.
Yeah, she knew he'll be here eventually.
Yeah.
Oh,
there's
the
books
fly
here.
comes,
Yeah.
the fly comes. But it was, and then I had that, and we then had a lovely conversation of just sharing different ideas. And then she sent me all of those things. Like I had a lovely one in a bookshop. I was in Sedbergh at a lovely place called Westwood Books. And quite often when I'm doing a gig in a bookshop beforehand, people who don't know, who I am and they're not coming for the event, they just presume that I'm a bookseller. And so people will ask questions. So I was, but this person did know. They'd come to the gig, and I'd been in the bookshop for a few hours, so I knew where everything was. And I saw her looking at the death section. I said, do you mind? I said, what kind of book are you looking for? She said, oh, something about the kind of cultures and traditions around the world of death. I went, oh, I know which one you need. It's Caitlin Doherty. Doughty. It's a really good book. She went, oh, fantastic. Do you know where the cannibal books are? I said, yeah, they're just over there. But you probably already got Ray Tannehill. She went, oh, I have got Ray Tannehill. I said, yeah, everyone's always got that, haven't they? And then I get to a bookshop in Swindon about 2 weeks later, and they say, by the way, we've got some mail for you. And she sent me 3 books.
Oh, wow.
And then I got to a bookshop in Bristol, Bookhouse, and I got a message the other day that said, oh, I forgot to mention when you came to do the gig, are you still in Bristol because you've got some mail? So like the fact that I'm now, firstly, people are going to presume either we find out his home address, but it's far more likely we'd find him in a bookshop. So which bookshops here? Yeah. But again, all of that sharing and that excitement and that fight again is just... I find it so... I think anxiety gets in our way a lot of the time in so many different ways. And one of them is in having conversations. I've spent most of my life with people saying, why are you saying that weird thing? That's weird, that's weird, that's weird. And once you actually, if you are lucky enough to get some form of understanding of your brain or sometimes an outsider diagnosis or whatever it might be, and you can start to get used to it, it improves the world remarkably. When you go, I will be asking weird questions, I'll be saying weird things, and somewhere on this journey, hopefully you and I will discover something wonderful and beautiful and strange, and we'll share. So I think that again, I think it comes back to kindness and compassion as well. That bit of when you see someone and you know you can just talk to them, and the things that I've learned after gigs, yesterday, one of my favourite things is quite often, sometimes teenagers bring their parents, sometimes parents bring their teenagers, sometimes grandparents, all that kind of thing. And chatting to a mother and a son, and they've both now been diagnosed with ADHD and autism. He's only in his teens, so it's not a nice early stage. She's got through a lot of her life with that. And just the things that they want to share and the stories they want to tell you. And yeah, it's just a beautiful humanising thing.
So, sorry, I was going to say, was it always social anxiety though?
It was every bloody form of anxiety. It really was. It was kind of obviously social. I mean, social anxiety would include literally, walking down the street, anything that was outside, anywhere where there might be someone who could judge the way that you were walking. Were you walking in a weird way with people? I've always had that sense that people are kind of, who's that weirdo, who's that freak, wherever I've been. But I think I masked it pretty well. And then I started to go. I remember I was doing the Latitude Festival, and the person who was running the stage is a wonderful author called Lisa. I don't know if you know Lisa Blower. She's really, really good.
Hello, yeah.
And she said, "Oh man, I always just watch you with such envy. You're so confident. I see the way that you put together all those shows and the way you talk to people and stuff." And I thought, "Oh yeah." And then someone did it another time, and I thought, "Oh yeah, all these people see a confident human being, and they don't realise that at the moment I finished talking to her, my brain goes, oh my god, did you say something that looked like it was rude, or did you say, oh my god, was there something that you said that could be interpreted as being like some kind of weird sexual thing, or and so
I call that the post-match analysis.
Yeah, that's what it is. It is, and normally it's going on during the match as well.
Yeah.
What am I saying? What am I saying? What am I saying? Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
And I had never realised. I mean, I think a lot of us just go, I don't want to make a fuss. And this, we keep hearing different stories of people. Sometimes it's actually about physical pain. I saw something today, a woman who had an injury in her wrist, and basically this then exacerbated a pain that she found out wasn't normal. But she'd just been living with a physical pain. Where Doctor, if she always, and she was like, oh, I kind of just thought that's what
Everyone had.
Yeah. and so that freeing up is you just find out how much more energy you have. I mean, I'm normally quite an energetic person anyway in terms of creating things, but I've got even more time now because the anxiety is remarkably draining, and it's only when you've taken that heavy coat off that you go, wow. Like I was walking to, did either of you go and see the horror show at Somerset House?
No, but I've heard about this.
Oh, well, you missed a treat. You were both fools not to do that. Wonderful exhibition. And I was going there with my son and my wife. Just suddenly I had that, when you just notice and you go, oh yeah, I've got all the way here. I'm just having a chat with the person on the door. And I've not got that voice. And I didn't sit on the train being worried perpetually about people's judgment of me, or think, oh no, I bet the toilet's out of order and I bet I need the toilet on the train, or all those different things. It was there's a little moment I think sometimes where you go, oh man, that's 40 years that I did, but then you go, that's fine anyway, that's in the other bit of the block universe. Now the way ahead, enjoy the clearing that exists,
the presence. But I do wonder if the fact that you've had that for so many years has actually made you more open and empathetic to others. And I don't know, we both suffer from anxiety.
You're in good company.
Anxiety.
I think I've seen both of you mention that in the past.
In the story of my whole life since I was like a toddler, and I've always found that the people that I feel the most comfortable with are the people that also suffer from anxiety, and it's like you have that openness to make people feel more open, to make people feel more comfortable and stuff. And I wonder if that's why, paradoxically, even though you've had this social anxiety, you're now more able to sort of have these conversations with people and go up to people in bookshops and say, oh, have you tried this book and stuff like that? Because most people, if people don't suffer from social anxiety, it's quite unusual to just start a conversation with a stranger in any setting. People kind of recoil, like, oh my god, what's this person? They either want to know the time, they want to know directions, or they're insane. Or they want, exactly. We're quite cynical in that way, aren't we? But maybe, I don't know, maybe the fact that you've had some form of social anxiety has made you more open to...
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you can't ever, that hope that if only that hadn't, you go, well, everything is what makes you. You know, there can obviously for some people be truly terrible things where you think, yes, to have removed that event in someone's life and you want to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely played a huge part, and the realization, you know, to be in my 50s, and like on Friday, I went to see someone called Heidi Heels, who lives in Bristol, and she's in, amongst other things, the Fallen Women, who are an all-female full tribute band who are absolutely excellent. And she said, "Oh, I've moved into this house and there's loads of books there, that ones that I was mentioning beforehand, and do you want to come and have a look?" And we were just having a cup of tea, and I brought some biscuits, and we were just chatting away, and I was suddenly very aware of the fact that both of us perhaps in the past would have had a wariness of, oh my God, did I just say a weird thing? But because both of us know that we have this, everything was, you know, that's the thing that disappears. Sometimes you've sat with people and both of you are going through the same thing. But once you know that both of you going, then all bets are off. It's fine.
Yeah.
And you've both been tiring yourself out with, I say, I just talked over you. I'm so sorry. That's absolutely fine. I can see that. Oh my God, what was I talking about in the first place? What did we start off by talking about? It's all fine. It's all fine. And the relaxation of being in that company.
It's energizing.
Yeah. Oh, hugely so. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't need to worry about what I'm saying, like them judging me, because they're probably worrying about themselves. They're busy questioning themselves. But yeah, no, it is. It's being in the presence of like-minded people is very energizing, and being in the presence of people that are, you know, cynical and aggressive and defensive can be quite tiring, can't it?
Yeah, I've cut so much of that out. I've always tried to do that. And more, you know, I'm lucky to, you know, I've been working with Josie Long for a very long time, and you know, we used to have a very lucky thing actually, which was sometimes when she was really down over stuff, career stuff, or whatever it was when I would be on and up, and so then you can put your hand down, and then you know, the seesaw goes the other way, and I think we'd worked out our cycles quite well in terms of being able to grab the hand of the other person.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really nice when you find those kindred spirits, isn't it? Yeah, there's something very empowering about it. I guess going back to the ideas thing and kind of curating ideas and how, I guess, are there enough ways of curating ideas, you know, that we can then allow people to effectively go through with them? Like, we're not, I feel like a lot of ideas are stamped out quite early doors.
Yeah. There was a great exhibition at the Science Gallery, which used to no longer there in Dublin, which was called Fail, Fail Again, Fail Better, you know, the Beckett thing. And it, as well as having a first draft of a manuscript by Beckett, it had, you know, James Dyson's first machine that he made that didn't all the failures. Yeah. And I think this is one of, the allowance for failure is you know, it's like, get ready for this. It's like Wittgenstein said. Yeah, I said that. He said, you know, if people didn't do stupid things, then nothing intelligent would get done. Yeah. And that bit of just going, like, I was talking to a friend of mine, Samina, who's moved out to New Zealand now, and she's based in Wellington. She's a great artist and writer and activist and stuff like that. And she said when I was there back in December, she said, it's just amazing being in New Zealand. She said, because you come up with an idea and no one immediately says no. She said about 5 of the first hurdles are just not there. And I've talked to an Australian filmmaker friend of mine, Darren. He said the same thing. He says, you just go, what about? And before you finish, you go, oh, they've got the hammer and the nails out already. And they're, whoa, you know, they're building the thing. And I think that is, I've always found a lot of the institutions I've worked for, you come up with an idea and they go, no, that won't be able to be done. And you go, it's all right, I've got a mate and she can do it actually. She's I think that would be too much, but it's too much bother. So I agree, that thing of saying there is, it's a bit like, you know, the pragmatism where people say, what am I going to get out of this? What's that going to do? You know, all of the best in terms of, for me personally, a lot of the ideas that led to things like Infinite Monkey Cage, that led to, you know, the world tour that Brian did, or the books that I've written, none of them started with a grand plan. They started because, because I did a show which ended with me punching a melon with Vernon Kay's face drawn on it, and then singing Mustang Sally, which was, it turned out, not everyone's cup of tea. And that led to me then doing a show called Book Club, and that I got loads of artists who I thought, oh, hang on a minute, the comedy club spaces aren't right for some of the more kind of eccentric and intriguing acts. And all of those things, none of them made money. You know, we literally, the book club thing, we sold out every time we did it, and the money was just put behind the bar, and everyone would just have a drink. But all of those plans, if someone had said, right, so we're very interested in putting money into book club, what are we going to get out of it? And I'd have no idea. All it came out of, I want to create something that is just and I wanted to get rid of judgment as well. I remember the first night walking out there and saying, there's lots of acts on tonight. They're going to be experimenting with all sorts of things. And some of the acts are going to come out and do something, and you may well sit there and go, oh, this is not any good at all. And what you have to remember is you're wrong. And because I'd seen the comedy clubs get to that point where everyone was tested just the whole time. So you end up not experimenting. You end up going, Jongleurs, which was, the big chain at the time. Jongleurs, if someone started doing new jokes, they'd go, hang on a minute, what are you doing? No, we've booked you for that set.
Yeah.
And all sense of art then goes, all sense of creativity.
Yeah.
And the next thing is you realise that actually you've got a job where a lot of people found that in lockdown. There's a few comics who went, so I just got a normal job, and I found out it was much better. Because I've had to be going up to Sunderland for 110 quid, and by the time I've taken everything into account, so now I'm delivering groceries, and I get home. All that kind of stuff. And so that it's so important, I think, to not have a grand plan, but just try and make stuff where you go, right, I've got an idea and I just want to make it. Well, who's it for? I don't know. When I started doing, a lot of the shows, a lot of the audience that come along now, there was no grand plan. And now there's a certain, when I say a certain, even that's very broad. I do get people in their 90s and I do get people who are 12. But the one grand plan I have now is that it has become one of my purposes to hope that everyone feels happier to be alive at the end of the show and feels a little bit more included. And that has become more and more important to me. But that didn't come out, it just came out of me getting better at going. It's a bit like if you play Belfast, Glasgow or Liverpool, they can be quite tough crowds. They'll see through you. They'll see if you don't mean it. And I can almost track that point where actually it was a night in Belfast. I was trying out a new show. I always start new shows in Belfast if I can because they talk as fast as me there. And I did about 2.5, 3 hours or something with permission from the venue, I should add. And I did allow people out if they wanted. I looked at the time. I said, officially, this is when the gigs. I said, you're free to go at any point. I'm not going to pick on you, whatever. But I did this show, and it was had lots of just a hodgepodge of ideas. But this woman came up to me afterwards and just wanted to talk about the fact that it was the first time she'd come out since her dad had died. And she just wanted to share the story. And I just sat and then some other people came along and they just wanted to. And I thought, again, it wasn't that conscious then, but now there is a point where people feel they can just come up and say, hello, I just want to tell you this. And sometimes it's a very happy story, and sometimes it's a story of things they've overcome or whatever. But I now look back 15 years ago to that and think, yeah, I think I was beginning to get it then.
Well, you're kind of being authentic and doing, I guess, working more intuitively rather than thinking like, right, what's going to sell, what's going to make the most money. And I think all creatives or people that are self-employed will at some point come across this issue because you think, right, I've got to make ends meet here, I've got to pay the bills, so let's try and make some money. And then you end up kind of like burning out, and then you're miserable, and then you're like, you might as well go and get another job, like just delivering groceries or whatever, because if you're not doing what makes you passionate, what you're passionate about, what makes you happy, then people generally, they can see right through it. And same with my artwork. There were times when going through the creative process, building up my career, when I felt the pressure to like paint what I thought was going to sell, but then actually doing the stuff that might be a bit slightly different that I didn't know for sure was going to sell ended up selling better.
I mean, that badger skull collection you're going to do, amazing.
The animatronic badger skulls.
That's the way forward, I think.
I'm going to call the collection Upon Death.
Yeah. I thought it was just kind of Wind in the Willows, naked. The
Naked Attractions, Charles's favourite TV show.
Oh my goodness. That was the thing when you were. That it reminded me of. Have you ever seen? There's a feature-length documentary about Ralph Steadman. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
Do you know Ralph Steadman's work?
No.
You would. Do you know what? It's one of those things you would know if you saw.
It. Yeah, I'm not very good with names at all.
It's very much kind of big splashes and with momentum, and it's got this beautiful bit where quite often he starts the day by dipping into the Indian ink, and he's got a big canvas there, and he just goes splat,
Yeah.
And then he goes, what am I going to make out of that? And it's a beautiful thing in the documentary where he eventually turns it into some kind of dog or whatever. And then he finishes it at the end of the day and he goes, well, I don't like that at all. But you know that it's like I got him once to do the Large Hadron Collider for a magazine that I was helping edit for kind of one-off thing. And I heard afterwards that because people said normally you can buy his art. If you've commissioned him to do something for a magazine, he'll sell it to you.
Oh, cool.
And initially he apparently went, oh, Large Hadron Collider, what an awful commission this is. And then he actually loved doing it so much that he said, I'm really sorry I can't sell it to you because I'm keeping it for myself. So but I loved that, his first thing was, oh, why have I been given that?
Yeah.
And then he finished it. And like the thing, I'm sure both, we've all had that thing that when you work on a project and then suddenly afterwards you realise how you've managed to educate yourself.
Yeah.
By going, that's part of the excitement, I think, is that I've found ways of just, someone asked me the other day, said, do you have any hobbies? I went, well, no, why would I have a hobby? A hobby is an escape from your work. My work is, that's it, that's everything.
Yeah.
I love it, and I will create whenever I can. In fact, I found that during lockdown, where the first few days of lockdown, I had a headache that just wouldn't go away. And then I sat down and I just wrote, I suddenly thought, I've got an idea for a thing. And I wrote, I think, 5,000 words that afternoon, and the headache went. And I actually found out that, Josie and me used to do a live show every morning as well. And it was like that we had to create something.
Yeah.
Or it felt like there was a physical build-up manifesting inside us.
Yeah.
You had to sort of exorcise that demon down.
Yeah, it's like if you drilled into your head, you'd hear a whistling sound. It'd be like a kettle, just pouring out.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah.
so lucky that as well that you've got that, because some people are just emotionally and creatively just dry, like a desert, and they just think that that's how life should be. Just go to work, come home, watch TV, read the news, go on Twitter, start an argument with someone, and that's life, kind of thing. Have you found that when you're coming up with these ideas, you have to be kind of careful about who you share them with, because people, and when you were saying, if it doesn't line up, your idea doesn't line up with another person's idea of reality or concept of reality, then it's like, oh no, it can't be done, kind of thing. Do you have like a select few people that you'll share ideas with who are going to be like, yeah, sounds great, go for it? So.
Well, I always work with the same people generally. So, I'm not someone in the mainstream media, or apart from Infinite Monkey Cage, I don't do anything for the BBC, and I don't really do anything so I'm very rarely employed apart from by myself. And so, it will be Josie, or more often than not, it's my friend Trent Burton, who is the Cosmic Shambles site that we do, and I will, he's great, because I will just ring up and go, Trent, I've got an idea for a thing, right? We could make it like be a 17-part series, right? And it'll be a bit start with Don't Look Now or something like that. And I've got a couple of mates that I've met, and there was a woman I met who's a painter, and she'd be great about that. And then he'll go, okay. And so I am, in our relationship, I'm the one who's always pacing around going, got an idea. And he's very, very good at, and very trustworthy as well. This is the thing, is that I think for all of us, we can go through life and you start to realise, hang on a minute, I'm prepared to put myself out for that person. But when it came the other way round, then that was not, it's an interesting, I was talking with someone the other day, going back to the mental health thing, about that she really helped someone through a difficult time. And then when she was having a difficult time, this bloke just got someone else for the band instead. And you go, no, this has to, and so I do have the small group of people, and Carl Cooper, who I made a series called Reality Tunnel with on Radio 4. Carl's a very old friend of mine, and I love, again, just creating things with him, and he does Mark Steele's in town on Radio 4 stuff as well, and I sit in his it's like Brian, when I was on tour, Brian Cox one day went, why aren't you staying in the posh hotel tonight? And I went, I'm going to Levenshulme because my mate Carl's there, he's got a self-inflating lilo, and if you give me the choice of the luxury hotel or sleeping on the floor of Carl's office, that's where I'm much more comfortable.
Yeah.
Because we'll sit up late. We get kind of just go, oh no, I don't like this stand-up special. I don't like this. Oh, you've got to watch this, Robin. You've got to find it. Do you not know about? And he will just introduce me to loads of ideas. And that's the other thing as well, isn't it, in terms of creativity, which is, if you see an exhibition and you think, oh, don't like the sound of that, go. You need to go, because there's lots of artists that and by artists now I mean, you know, the same with music and everything, which is you go, oh, I'll just see what it's like, and then you can't go. I never knew about you. Do you know Robert Rauschenberg?
No.
Right, he's American painter.
I've realised we're not very
Every single person
culture,
you've mentioned, we've
we're
been
not very
like,
cultured.
No, it's fine though, because it's like I remember someone coming up to me when I was doing a gig in somewhere like Italy or something like that, and they said, I don't think we didn't get all your cultural references, though we enjoyed it. I said, don't feel that's because I'm in Italy. I said, it's exactly the same when I'm in the UK, because again, it's that bit where I've realised that there's just too many things in. You know, Brian always goes, no one knows anything you're talking about. I've never seen any of the films that you like, and
well, you must have like a good memory. You retain. If I barely remember, you know, like my friends' names half the time, that I've just got such.
Names, that kind of name I'm not very good on, but also because every single night when I'm doing a show, it will be a different show. So I try as much as possible. Just, you know, I'll start with almost the last conversation I've had, chatting to the bookseller or whatever, just before going on and go, oh, we were just talking about this thing. So it means that I think that helps the memories, because if I've seen something that I love, the thing that I want to do is share it with everyone. So like the film The Quiet Girl, I'm not even going to ask. Okay. But The Quiet Girl, right, I saw that Irish film, fantastic. It's nominated for the best foreign film at the Oscars, and I just watched that, and now I have to tell everyone about it. And my friend Barry Crimmins, comedian who's no longer with us, unfortunately, there's a movie about him called Call Me Lucky, made by Bobcat Goldthwait, and if any chance, I'll say, you got to see this, you got to see it. So because it becomes part of a show and it becomes part sometimes of an audience experience, I think that helps. But yeah, Rauschenberg I knew nothing about him, and then he had a big exhibition at the Tate Modern, and you know, when I don't know if you've certain artists where you can't help but smile at everything they've made, that there's something which, and I don't know what it is, there's something in their process that has somehow, without there being a written joke or anything, there's a delight. Like Rauschenberg, so he fought in the war, and then he went on the Americans, you know, you got given, I can't remember what it's called now, there was a special kind of dispensation which allowed you to go off and learn. When you stopped being a GI, the GI Bill, something like that. Went off to France, realised he really wanted to make stuff. And he would just do, like, sometimes he'd just look at boxes and go, wonder how many different ways you can unfold them, and then what they look like on the wall when you unfold. And you just, so that was one thing. And then another thing went, I should work with some scientists. I'm going to make a vat of mud that bubbles. And then there was a thing called erased de Kooning, which is one of my favourites. I used to talk about this a lot, which was William de Kooning, the artist who was at that point in New York, he's still very, very famous, but Rauschenberg really looked up to him. He was like one of those artists. And Rauschenberg said, can I have one of your works, please? I'd like to rub it out. And he was like really annoyed about this, and eventually he'd been pestered so much he made this really intense piece with loads of pencils, and then Robert Rauschenberg spent a whole month just erasing as hard as he could, keep erasing, and then just put it in a frame and said erase de Kooning. And suddenly that to me is a really beautiful idea. What was there? It's like, you know, when you see on a wall where there has obviously been a painting for a long time, because now the discoloration around the side. And I was at an old house in Tiverton on Wednesday, and there was lots of that, and they've deliberately kept it. And that, what was there, is such a great thing. But yeah, Rauschenberg, just I knew nothing of him beforehand, and then I was obsessed immediately afterwards, because I was like, or obsessed during, really, because I was like, everything he's looking at, he's going, and he seems like a really joyful person as well. He became a choreographer for a while because someone mistakenly put in a program that he was a choreographer, so he thought, might as well be that. And so he worked with John Cage and Merce Cunningham and stuff like that.
That's amazing.
Wow.
The metaphorically, the painting that's been removed from the wall and the shadow of its former self is left, that is ghosts to me. If we want to go back.
Exactly. I would definitely say all of those things are like this house in Tiverton. It was amazing as well, because so I did this talk. I had a lovely big room and just really delightful audience. Again, lots of different ages. Lovely older couple who the woman came up to me afterwards and said, yeah, it's funny really, because I had a whole family and everything in London. So I was about 60 before I realised I was a lesbian. You know, that kind of like then had a little story there. And then I talked about the author Jean Rees, who wrote Wide Sargasso Sea, and then Tara, who actually owns the house, she went, I just wanted to tell you, My grandmother is the only person who, when Jean Rees was alive, actually managed to get one of her plays on the radio. She performed a version of Good Morning Midnight. I said, next Friday I'm doing a show all about Good Morning Midnight, so you need to come on to that. Again, all that bit that if you don't think all the time, what do they want? You just go, well, I'm going to try and get. I really want people to be happy. But I don't want to do, if I suddenly walked out there and they went, just so you know, Robin, they're a very racist crowd. And I'd go, well, the most important thing is to make them laugh. It's a double thing, which is I really want people to have a fantastic time, but it kind of will be on my terms as well. But I hope that no one will ever be able to leave a room. Anyone who's hated the show, they would still go, I'll tell you what, I hated that show, but I mean, he did put a lot of effort in. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the important part of
Will
it.
you, when I have my next exhibition, will you write the review for it?
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible, but she put a lot of.
There was no badger skulls. I was really disappointed.
Oh, just leave the shape of a badger skull on the wall. That's all I want. Just
Yes.
very slight.
Yeah, like there's been one there for many, many years, and it's now been etched into the wallpaper.
Oh, I see dead badgers sometimes. I live in the middle of nowhere.
No.
That is such a great version of Sixth Sense. I see dead badgers.
I see badgers.
It's been
We don't
remade
know
with
they're
Chris
dead.
Packham. Really? Yeah, Chris Packham.
Yeah.
The Bruce Willis role. Amazing.
Yeah, Chris Packham doesn't realise he's a badger.
Yeah.
Well, Robin Ince, it's been an absolute delight. We could talk to
Hang
you
on,
for
we haven't
hours
done
and
loads of
hours.
questions.
I know.
Right, tell me the questions you had, and we'll just check on what they were
It's
going
just
to
a picture
be.
of a badger on it.
They've just born a badger and a few time codes. So
Okay.
We've covered everything, I think.
Oh, well, thanks very much for having me.
No, thank you.
Yeah, you're one of these people that I feel like you're knowledgeable on a lot of things, and we could talk to you about anything. Like, I feel like we could be like, right, Robin, today we're going to talk about baking, and you'd have all of this insightful information, and then we would feel.
See, I love you because the moment you did that, I was thinking, and I suddenly remembered a wonderful book that I have, which I recommend to everyone.
Oh, go on.
Because I do think that things, again, the tangibility and the taste, and the memory that goes with that, and all those kind of proofs and beyond things. But there's just this fantastic. I don't know if it's still in print, but it's called the Holocaust Survivors Cookbook, and it is for people who survived the World War II Holocaust, and they are sometimes recipes of their own, and sometimes they're recipes of their family members who died in the camps.
Wow.
And it's such a, because as you're making it, you can't help but feel the hands. And again, the humour, it's like there's a Jacob Bronowski who made The Ascent of Man. There's an incredible, one of the episodes ends with him talking about basically that ideology is the thing that we, when men believe they're gods. He said it was not science that created this, and he's standing in Auschwitz, and he says, I must do this in memory of my family who died, and he pulls out stands. No, the director didn't know he was going to do this, right? He's just a little man in a suit, but he walks into this puddle, the deep puddle, and he just bends down and he pulls up the weeds and the mud that will of course be mixed also with some of the, those people who died there. And it's such a incredible, again, the tangibility of if it, you can read as many books as you want, but that physical communication, that sense of what else is in this mud, all of those things. I just think so. That's the conversation we'd have had if you'd said, let's talk about baking.
Yeah, interesting that's the turn that took.
But I just, it's always, it excites me so much where, again, it's become just much easier in the last couple of years, because this is what goes on the whole time in my head. And
So I take it you don't like meditate or anything.
no, I've tried all those. I just, it's a bit like I had a brain scan a while ago for fun, and I've had two just for fun. I'm always available
Just
for.
a
I
recreational
love
one.
stuff like that. and the one bit that reading was wonky was where I was meant to just be calm and not think about anything, and they said, yeah, that bit's not normal. I said, well, I got bored very very quickly, so I started playing a scene from the Bob Hoskins film The Long Good Friday in my head, because I'll quite often do that, or sometimes I'll just.
Why that movie though?
Oh, I love that movie.
It's a great movie, but I
Yeah.
just wondered why that one just.
I don't know. Do you know what? I don't know what it was, but it must have been the sound of the magnets somehow reminding me of Francis Monkman's soundtrack. But yeah, that sometimes I just walk in rooms and in my head and see how much I can. When you walk through an old school maybe that you went to, and you think, hang on a minute, was it that colour? Were the floor tiles that colour? And I'm always interested in just So yeah, it's interesting because then there's artists, aren't there, that have found out what's that thing called? Let's get this wrong. Which is my friend John Higgs wrote about it in his book about William Blake, which is where people have no internal visual imagination. So if you say apple, they can't see an apple.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And then apparently there's quite a few artists with that, and I find that really interesting because I think people imagine that artists have loads of images in their heads, but some people have no images, and therefore I'm thinking that must be one of the reasons that the image goes on the canvas.
They have to, because you have to create something more tangible because you can't throw that. I'm not one of these people, unfortunately. I'm similar to you, Robin.
I knew that.
Always talking in my head.
Well,
Thank
Robin,
you. That's the
thank
end
you
now,
so
isn't
much.
it?
It is the end.
Is this the real ending or another false ending? Let's find out.
No, but thank you very much.
No, just kidding.
Thank you.
We'll carry on talking.